Benjamin Rush.
Yes, Dr. Benjamin Rush. He was signer of the Declaration of Independence. He was the Surgeon General of the Continental Army.
He wasn't Jewish, though.
He was not Jewish. He also was a big promoter of the Bible being a textbook in the public schools of America. He's considered the father of the American public school system. Yeah. What many of us don't realize is that for the first century and a half, the Bible was a standard textbook.
Right.
Yes, and what happened was that America had the ratification of the Constitution. So we're talking 1787, and then the years following, where we have the full ratification. And there was a parade in Philadelphia, and he made an observation that he saw celebrating this parade, marching, was a rabbi and two ministers of the gospel, arm in arm, and that made him so happy. He said there could not have been a more happier emblem. So he's saying, look at this, we have this new country, this new constitution, Jews and Christians together for this cause. What could be better than this?
That's great.
Yes.
Great concept.
It is.
I think that's great. There's another name, too, when we talked earlier, Elias Boudinot.
Elias Boudinot. Elias Boudinot is a fascinating figure. He was a delegate at the Continental Congress from New Jersey. He became the president of that Congress. Now, America, you have to understand, from 1776 to 1787, did not have a constitution. So our government was the Articles of Confederation. Whoever was president of the Congress was president of the United States. 14 men, he was one of them, was president before George Washington. George Washington is our first president under the Constitution. But there were 14 men who actually were the president of the United States before him, and he was one of them, yes. And he was also...
I bet that's something that kids don't read about in the textbooks.
It's not a very well-known fact, and he was president from 1782 to 1783. He was, in effect, George Washington, or I should say General Washington's boss, and what he did was he formed a society called the Society for the Amelioration for the State of the Jews, which is another way of saying the Society for the Improving the Condition of the Jews. And what he did was, he wasn't a wealthy man, but he gave his own money to find persecuted Jews in Europe or wherever he could find in the world, to bring them to America. And he said, if they want to be introduced to Christianity, he was a believing Christian, he would have loved for the Jews to become Christians, but if they don't, it won't be under fear or terror. So what he's saying is that if you don't want to be a Christian, fine, and there will be no coercion as there was in Christian Europe.
Interesting.
Yes, I mean, again, not a very well-known.
Now, all these nuggets of history that you're sharing, how did you become interested in this topic?
Well, I always wanted to know, again, the why. Why was America so different? So what I realized was that these American founding fathers were Bible-believing Christians, and their influence came a century before, in the 1600s, when the Puritans came to America and established the settlements in North America. There are if you go to that time period, there are three major figures of the Puritans who absolutely shaped and molded the thinking of the founding fathers in establishing the United States. One is John Winthrop. John Winthrop is the founder of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. He was absolutely influenced by the Bible. He read the book of Exodus, and he saw the Puritans as being the Hebrews, a reenactment.
Isn't that something?
Yes, the Puritans are the Hebrews. England is Egypt. The corrupt Church of England is the Pharaoh. Going across the Atlantic Ocean, the splitting of the Red Sea. North America.
What an interesting parallel.
Yes, so he was influenced by that symbolism. The other leading figure of the Puritans was Thomas Hooker. Thomas Hooker founded the colony of Connecticut, which is where we are now in the state of Connecticut, and he gave a sermon to the assembly in Hartford in which he invoked a biblical passage, the first chapter in Deuteronomy, which it says, "Take ye wise men to be rulers over you," or choose ye wise men. So that meant some form of democracy. That became the inspiration for the fundamental orders of Connecticut, which many historians cite as the first written constitution to give us representative government. And then the third most influential of the Puritan background is Roger Williams. Of course, Roger Williams is the founder of Rhode Island.
And he's written in all the history books.
Yes, and he introduced to the New World religious tolerance and separation, the institutional separation of church and state.
Which was unheard of.
Which was unheard of. So
yeah.
this was a mystery for me. I'm like, okay, here I'm looking at Roger Williams. He considers himself a religious Christian. So how was he able to do this? This is not what Christianity had been for centuries. Been a cause of intolerance and hatred and bloody and death and killings of Jews. A choice of between the sword or the cross. So, just a little bit of background. Roger Williams was actually employed by the Puritan Establishment Church of Massachusetts. And he was a gifted preacher, and he started saying things that the establishment didn't like. He was very critical of many of the things that the Puritans were doing. The Puritans did have intolerance. Probably the most well-known is the Salem witch trial.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he absolutely attacked the doctrine of persecution. Now, there was, at this time, a spokesman for the Puritans named John Cotton. John Cotton said this is absolutely a Christian thing to do, to persecute for those who don't have the correct belief. Roger Williams was opposed to that. He was going to be deported to England, have a trial, and either be in prison or maybe even be killed for this. So he escaped. He ran away from Massachusetts, and he ran to what today is Rhode Island. He gets a colony, and he establishes the colony to allow religious tolerance and separation. And his thinking on where he got this idea was a book he published. He wrote this book in 1644. And in the book, he actually counters what John Cotton was saying. And what he does is he takes the Christian Bible. He takes the book of Romans. And in the book of Romans, it talks about the Ten Commandments and what government's role should be. And Roger Williams interprets it as follows. The first half of the Ten Commandments about, you should have one God, you shouldn't worship idols, have a Sabbath day, that's between man and God, Roger Williams writes in his book. So he's using biblical reasoning to push the cause of separation of government and religion. The other half of the Ten Commandments about thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, the government has absolute right to be involved in those matters. So that's where you get your separation. And then religious tolerance, he goes to, again, the Christian Bible. He goes to the book of Matthew. And in the book of Matthew, there's a parable. Christians know it as the parable of the tares or the parable of the weeds. And real quick, what that is about is that you have your believers and your non-believers. So Jesus' original disciples are saying, okay, what do you do about the non-believers, the so-called weeds? Should we take care of them? So Roger Williams says, from this text, we're getting that the answer is no. Don't do it. Let God handle it at the end of days, because if humans get involved, you not only kill the non-believers, but you kill the believers as well. And Roger Williams saw this in history, because if you go back to the Reformation, where you have a Protestant establishment, every major Christian denomination was both the persecutor and the persecuted. So they experienced both sides of this, and Roger Williams essentially said, enough. He takes that interpretation to allow it, and he's saying that whether they be Jews or Muslims, pagans, atheists, leave them alone. Let God decide at the end. And that is why Rhode Island was the first colony to allow, not only to allow Jews, but the first Jewish congregation came to Rhode Island in 1658, later to be incorporated in the Toro Synagogue that we just mentioned.
You're incredible.
Thank you.
Your mind is like an encyclopedia with all this information that you shared.
Well, there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
A lot, and your enthusiasm for it, too.
Well, it really, to me,
terrific.
It answered a big question. It answered, and I hope what the viewers take with them is to have a more honest understanding of our history, because we benefit from the results. We benefit from the religious freedom to be able to choose on our own, to elect our leaders. And I think we should know, what is the cause? Where did that come from? It was not that they were predominantly secular, but they were actually religious.
Interesting. Let me ask you a question. I know you don't have a crystal ball. None of us do. Do you think our concept of the separation of church and state will continue into the future?
Only if this history, which for the most part has become a lost history, is both found and taught. There is a risk. The risk isn't so much America becoming a theocracy. The risk is more that as Jews in our religion, the freedom's being threatened. For example, not too long ago in San Francisco, they wanted to ban the bris circumcision.
Yes, I read that.
In Europe, there have been, and in this country too, there have been attempts to ban kosher slaughtering.
Yes.
This not only affects Jews, but this affects people of all faiths. So unless we know our history, unless we realize that the benefits that we got as Jews wasn't because they were disinterested in religion, but just the opposite, we will have a better chance of having this religious freedom protections safeguarded.
Good answer. Very good answer. You know, we only have about 2 minutes left, would you believe? I told you things fly by.
Yes.
What would you like to tell our viewing audience? Something about doing your research, or something that you can take away.
I would say, again, read the writings of the Founding Fathers, look at their action.
Read their writings, look at their actions.
Look at their action, look at what they, under the Constitution, everything that goes on in Congress has to be recorded. Read that, and also learn the history of the American educational system. You'd be surprised that the Bible was a standard textbook.
Interesting.
That Thomas Jefferson had prayer services in the Capitol on a Sunday.
Wow.
So again, they have a relationship with religion that we're being told something that's either not true or that's just been forgotten.
Yeah, I know you often see in the writings and the literature that we're a Judaic Christian society.
Right.
What's your feeling about adding a Judaic Christian Muslim society?
Well, the Founding Fathers had a free market approach to religion. Muslims came to this country too in early American history, along with Jews, and they welcomed anybody because they were very confident in their own religion, and they did not feel challenged, and they felt their religion would win. But for Jews and other people of faith, it has given us the opportunity to embrace our heritage without coercion.
Right.
I mean, if there's a greater threat in the freedom, it's the threat of assimilation and not embracing, because America ultimately would be indifferent. So again, it was that free market approach to welcome all.
Wonderful. Wayne, I want to thank you. A most interesting, informative, enlightened discussion on this whole topic. I learned a great deal, and I'm sure our viewing audience earned a great deal.
Great.
And I want to congratulate you again.
Thank you.
And commend you for all the research that you did, all the work and time you put in, and I hope to get you back again.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you, and my best to your family.
Yes.
And especially Mary. She's very special.
Yes, she is.
Thank you. God bless you and your family.
Thank you.
And God bless our viewing audience. Hope you learned something tonight. Thank you.